Applying for employment in Canada is very, very specific and it's unique to Canada. A clue that a company is able to hire, a foreign worker is if they say. How's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Boma. I'm an award-winning community leader and entrepreneur, and my channel is essentially dedicated to helping you thrive and succeed as an immigrant in Canada. And in today's video, we are talking about how to get a job offer from overseas. If you're watching this video, you probably already know that it's very difficult getting a job offer from overseas if you don't already live in Canada, because the Canadian job market is very competitive and employers prefer people who already live in Canada. But you probably already know that having a job offer increases your chances of getting express entry points, provincial nominee points, and all that. So if you're curious about my recommendations on how to successfully get a job offer from overseas, please watch this video. Before we dive into it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps me grow on YouTube. Alrighty, thanks for watching and let's get started. Like I mentioned, if you are an immigrant wanting to move to Canada, getting a job offer from overseas is very, very challenging. And that's because for a Canadian employer, so I'll put myself as an example because I'm an employer, it is almost impossible for me to hire a foreign worker without having to go through lots and lots of paperwork. For most employers, such as myself, we're only able to hire a foreign worker if we can prove that no Canadian worker is able to do the job. And think about it, you kind of have to be in a very specialized field to be able to convince the government that no Canadian worker can do the job, right? Let me provide some background so you can really understand the complexities in getting a job from overseas, and then I'll tell you how you can actually get a job from overseas because I've got a few solutions. So the first thing you need to understand is that as an employer, it is very difficult to hire a foreign worker. And I will use myself as an example because I am an employer. So if I wanted to hire a foreign worker from, I don't know, Bangladesh, it is very, very difficult to do that. And before I'm actually allowed to do that legally, I would have to prove that there is nobody in Canada, there's no employee or worker in Canada that's able to do that job. And I mean, you could kind of, guess that that's going to be very difficult to do because Canada is a country that's filled with so many talented and skilled workers. So the government may not buy it. And even the process for me to tell the government, hey, I'm going to hire this foreign worker from a different country, there's a lot of paperwork. I have to do a labor market impact assessment, LMIA. There's a lot of hoops and paperwork that employers have to go through, which is why employers often don't hire workers who are not already eligible to work in Canada and are living in Canada. So hopefully that background is helpful to you. So you're in this position now where it's difficult, but you still want to be able to get a job offer from overseas just to, improve your chances of actually being able to live and work in Canada. So what are your options exactly? Well, I've got a few options for you. The first one is that you actually need to know how to apply for a job in Canada. And I have spoken about this before, and I'll put a pop-up here so you can go watch that video. Applying for a job in Canada is very unique, and maybe the similarity would be the US. But I find that many immigrants from other countries don't really know how to apply for work in Canada because it's such a specific system. And that means that unfortunately, immigrants apply to jobs here and they have, weirdly formatted resumes. They've got pictures in their resume. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of things that you need to be knowledgeable about before you can actually apply for jobs in Canada. There's certain things that you need to be mindful about, the length of your resume, how you write your name, your objectives in your resume, your experience in your resume. There's a lot of, technicalities that immigrants often don't know about, especially if you're in another country right now wanting to apply for work in Canada. So my first tip would be to actually learn how to properly format your resume and how to properly structure your application so it works in a Canadian context. And that's information that I know as a person who was an employee, and it's information that I use very, very heavily because I'm a person who is hiring people on a regular basis. So I see these differences with immigrants versus non-immigrants in terms of how resumes are done. So don't make these mistakes. Watch that video, and I'll also put a link down so you can download a resume template that will hopefully help you in your application journey. The second solution is the NAFTA agreement, and that's the North American Free Trade Agreement. And that's essentially an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. I know a lot of my viewers watch me from the United States, so if you're a person who is wanting to apply to work in Canada, NAFTA is a perfect solution if you're from Canada, the US, or Mexico. And so what are the qualifications for NAFTA? In addition to your citizenship, you have to have a profession that is eligible, and you need to be qualified to work in that profession. And you need to have pre-arranged employment with a Canadian employer. Very importantly, you need to have professional level services in the field of qualification, and you also need to be compliant with existing immigration requirements for temporary entry. So for Canada, for example, citizens of the US and Mexico are eligible to work in Canada, and the reverse is the case. So in the US, citizens of Canada and Mexico are able to apply. So if you're watching this in the US, look into NAFTA and see if your profession would be eligible. And so if you're wondering what professions are eligible, there is a long list on the NAFTA website. They include an accountant, architect, computer systems analyst, disaster relief, insurance claims, economist, engineer, forester, graphic designer, hotel manager, industrial designer, etc. There's quite a few professions that are eligible for NAFTA. I think there's around 61 or so. So check the NAFTA list if you're from the US and Mexico and see if you're eligible, and then go ahead using this knowledge to apply for employment in Canada. I think something you need to probably do is inform employers that you are eligible to work in Canada under NAFTA, because many employers don't know about NAFTA, so they don't know that citizens of Mexico and the US can legally work in Canada. So if they see that, you're applying and you have a US address, they may be like, clearly not eligible. But so what you need to do is in your application, your cover letter, say I'm eligible to work in Canada under the NAFTA agreement as a, XYZ profession. It's really important that you state that when you're applying in your cover letter, just so they don't toss your application out because they think you're American, so you're not eligible. I hope that makes sense. It was a lot of information. NAFTA, how it works is that you receive your employment at the point of entry. So that means that, you bring all your paperwork. One of the restrictions is that it needs to not be a job that you have any sort of connections to. So one of the restrictions for NAFTA is that it can't really be a job that you have any sort of financial connections to. So it can't really be a job where you're in the board or, you're the sole proprietor. It doesn't work like that. It has to be you going out of your way to find an independent position, independent from you, So essentially you bring, your proof of employment, you bring your diplomas, you bring all the things that state, what you're doing, because I have heard of people who were denied entry at the point of entry. So although you can be offered a job from an employer, it's still up to the customs officer at the point of entry to either grant you entry into Canada or say, sorry, I'm not buying it. And some of the reasons why you actually may be denied entry is if your employer has an existing labor dispute that the federal government is aware of. If your job has, some labor disputes going on, the customs officer can deny you entry. And there is a stipulation in the NAFTA agreements, I'll post that in the description below, that says that they can deny you entry on those grounds. I would say that one of the most common reasons why people are denied entry is just based on their duties. So I'll read this blurb out here from the NAFTA agreement. It says that the duties of the profession that the business person intends to practice in Canada must conform to the duties of the profession. So for instance, an accountant must be seeking to enter Canada as an accountant and not as a bookkeeper. Bookkeeping is not covered in the list of professions in section 1603.d. And so a bookkeeper cannot be authorized to work in Canada as an accountant unless the applicant is also qualified as an accountant. So it's very, very important that, if you say you're going to be coming to Canada as a social worker, which is one of the professions that's eligible, you cannot have in your job description, it says you're a social worker in title, but your job description is like managing a community center, Sure, it's very possible that a social worker working in a community center may be responsible for, doing some management of the community center, but when you're going to the border, your job description essentially has to be very, very cliche. It has to fit to a T. Essentially has to, click in the customs officer's mind when they think social worker. So to the customs officer, it's very possible that they'll be like, a social worker would not be managing a community center. What are you talking about, right? So make sure that you're really clear about that. So that's it about NAFTA. The third thing that you need to know in terms of finding work in Canada is looking for multinational corporations. When you're looking for work in Canada, it is very likely that larger multinational corporations are more likely to hire foreign workers because they're large. They also have, the funds and the resources, lawyers and accountants to prove that they're not able to find an alternative worker in Canada, so they had to go out of their way to find somebody overseas. So think of corporations like the big banks, RBC, TD, Scotia. Think of Sun Life, Manulife, those big corporations, oil companies. Those sort of big corporations are more likely to hire foreign workers. A clue that a company is able to hire, a foreign worker is if they say relocation package offered, which means that, they're open to hiring a worker who does not live in their current location. So that's a really good clue. So number one, a big company, and number two, look on LinkedIn, on Indeed or whatever, and, type in those keywords like relocation package and things like that. And of course, when you're applying for these jobs at multinational firms, you need to make sure that you're using the tips I mentioned above, which is using the techniques to be able to stand out in a Canadian job pool. So making sure that your resume is properly formatted and all that. So in summary, what you need to know to apply for jobs in Canada from overseas is number one, make sure your resume is formatted properly. Number two, depending on your country of citizenship, look into NAFTA. And number three, look into multinational firms. And maybe I'll sneak in number four, which is the international experience program, so work and holiday visas and things like that. I've made a video about it, and it's a really wonderful way to get, a work and holiday visa and also enable you to work in Canada from overseas. Alrighty, that was a lot of information. I hope it was helpful to you if you're interested in, getting a job offer from overseas. Let me know in the comments below if you've been successful getting job offers from overseas or if it's something that you're currently working on. I'd love to hear from you. Also join my Facebook group because I answer questions there as well. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your immigration journey, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.